Good morning and welcome to 30 Minutes of Faith. We're very happy to have Dave Wesley with us from Bayside, South Sacramento. It's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you.
You're very welcome. So glad to be invited.
Let's start with where you were born and raised and how you got started in life.
Okay, well, I was born in Detroit, Michigan, and lived there for about 25 years in Michigan, in that area. And then about 1981, a company that I was working for transferred me out to Sacramento, and I've been around California since the mid-'80s, early '80s.
So are you a Tigers fan?
I'm a Tigers fan, and I'm a Giants fan, so I have two rooting interests, I suppose.
My first baseball mitt at about age 7 or 8 was an Al Kaline.
Love Al Kaline,
Special.
one of my all-time heroes.
I thought that was really cool. Now, how did you come to the ministry?
Well, about 14 years ago now, I had a business career in marketing and business and worked for a number of different companies. And then I was on the board of elders for a church that I belonged to and attended. Had been there for a number of years, and we were going through a pastor search. And during that time, several people had come up to me and asked me if I had considered going into the ministry. And previous to that, I had probably discounted those suggestions, and maybe that, was me copping out to God's calling in my life. But at that time, I really felt led to pray about it and think about it, and also seek counsel from other Christian mentors and leaders that I respected. And so one thing kind of led to another, and I ended up accepting a call into the ministry and began as an associate pastor back in, I think, 2002 or thereabouts.
Now, let's jump back for a minute. Are your parents still living?
No, unfortunately, my mother passed away in 1985, and my dad passed away just before his 92nd birthday in 2010.
And you have siblings?
I do. I have two older brothers. I'm the baby, and so I have one brother that still lives back in Michigan and another one that lives in the East Bay over in Martinez.
And children and family?
Yeah, I've been married to my wife, Kathy, for 33 years. I better get it right.
Way to go.
And I have two children. I have a daughter, Sarah, who's 26, and she lives down in Pasadena with her husband. They'll be married 3 years in May. And
do you have a grandchild yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet.
All right.
Kathy and I waited 7 years, so we're not putting any pressure on
drill
Sarah.
there.
Yes. I figured they'll figure it out when
Sure.
it's good for them. And then I have a son, Mark, who is 23 years old. He graduated from college about a year and a half ago and has been actually in China. He taught English last year over there. And then this year, he's begun a 3-year MBA program to really get immersed in the language, take classes in Chinese, and he hopes to get his MBA in international business in a couple years from now.
Is he in Beijing?
No, he's actually in a town called, I should call it a town, but Wuhan. And I had never heard of it at first because I only know, like Beijing and, Hong Kong and cities like that. But this town of Wuhan is actually about 10 to 12 million people. So it's a pretty large city.
I've been in Wuhan. It's got a river running through it that Chairman Mao swam in as a kid, and they make that a big deal of it. Come right over here. We'll show you where Chairman Mao swam when he was 13.
I'll have to ask my son Mark if he's ever seen that spot of the river.
Big city, and that's nice that they can go out. And the world is small, and we are citizens of the world, not just of Detroit or Sacramento or wherever we might be.
Right. That never would have occurred to me when I was his age, to think in those terms, like, yes, I'm going to go to another country and study and teach, and that just was not part of my thinking back then.
Well, that's really cool. And the world's small enough now, we can get back and forth and see each other and Skype and email and all the other things that we do, so that works well. Now, let's talk about Bayside South, could we please, because most everybody will be aware that Bishop Carthen passed away, late last fall.
Right.
So how did you come to that position?
Well, actually, I had known Sherwood for since 2010, and there was a time when I was between pastoral assignments, and so while I was waiting, I was attending different churches in the Sacramento area where we lived, and just looking for a church home during that time. And I happened to attend Bayside, South Sacramento, when it was at City College at that time, and just really, like most people, just really loved Sherwood bringing the word and the sense of passion and the community that I felt when I was there. And I just felt almost like I was home. This is where I belonged. And shortly after that, a few months later, I ended up getting an opportunity as an interim senior pastor at a church in Hilmar, down in the Central Valley near Turlock. And I had that assignment for 2 years, and then I had another interim senior pastor assignment in Ripon, just a little north of that. But I stayed in contact with Sherwood during that time. We'd occasionally get together for coffee and kind of talk about, each other's families and the ministry, and kind of, I would, seek his advice on how to think about pastoring. And so then when my last time ended in Ripon at Heartland Community, then he had an opening on his staff for kind of like an associate pastor, I guess. And so I became the pastor of community care in July of last year. So I was on the staff, under Sherwood, and then on September 25th is when he passed away. And so that's how I came to be a boss.
On September 24th, the day before, I was with he and 8 or 10 others out at Capital Christian Center. Mm-hmm. We were talking winter shelter. And there was a young woman there from one of the TV stations who was really interested in him. Mm-hmm. And, she said to me, "Can you introduce me, da-da-da-da-da?" We talked for a minute. He was struggling that day. He was really perspiring. He was out of breath. And I didn't think, he's in deep trouble. But looking back on it, he was different than he had been before. And when I got the news the next day, of course, everybody was stunned. But I thought, well, he may have been leading up to it. And I was sorry that happened. Now, we have several Baysides in the greater Sacramento area. Are they all attached one way or another?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Bayside of South Sac, some of them are kind of campuses of Bayside Granite Bay, where they share kind of the oversight is shared of the various campuses, and I'm not an expert on their organizational structure, but we were birthed as kind of like a daughter church, and so Ray Johnston and Sherwood, at the time that Sherwood was planning a church, kind of, were working together and thinking about this church in South Sacramento, and so we've been kind of independent in a sense, but we look at them with great connection and affection in terms of being brothers and sisters in Christ, and so we have a great relationship with Bayside of Granite Bay. But the way that we manage or govern the church itself is done locally, separate from Granite Bay.
I've only attended Bayside South and Bayside Granite Bay one time, so I don't know anything about it. But one of the things at Granite Bay I noticed was sort of, in my words, a little more rock and roll, and let's really get down and just worship with great fervor and love. And Sherwood was more the Bible and more the doctrinal truth. Not to say that the others are not, but he was more conventional church, and the people really took to that and liked that a lot. And
he was gifted as a preacher.
And maybe the crowd there a little older.
In South Sacramento? I'm not sure. I haven't compared the two in terms of, kind of age spread. We have a lot. We have, a couple hundred children every weekend, children and youth that worship. I'd say about 20% of our attendance on a weekend is children and youth. And then we have, young families and, all the way up the spectrum.
Well, as I say, what do I know?
Disputing it, I don't know for sure.
So what's your future?
As a church? Or as
well, let's talk both. As the church down there and for you.
Okay. One of the things that I think was really heartening is a few weeks after Sherwood passed, we had kind of this legacy weekend where we kind of reflected on some of the things that he shared with us, the important truths that he shared with us. But we also came together in terms of almost like a giant potluck for the whole church, even though we have several services, and the sense that I got at that time is that, Sherwood was had such a presence that sometimes people could be tempted to sit back and, yeah, you go, Sherwood, you bring it. And after he passed, I think he had encouraged people all up to that time to say, you have a role here. We need to get up, out of our seats and make a difference in this community. Reach the homeless, reach the people who are hurting, and we're not just here to, listen to a sermon and then go home. We're here to be transformed so that we can be active in the community and making a big difference. And
was that well accepted?
Yeah, it was accepted, I think, intellectually before he passed, and then afterwards, I think people really felt a calling in their life, like, yeah, I do need to step up. I do need to raise my hand and say, I really belong here.
That's good.
And so I think there was a recommitment to the mission of the church. And so even though, we don't have Sherwoods speaking to us, week to week, we still continue strongly in the mission, and we're really excited about the future. And it's there's the mourning of the loss,
Sure.
and then there's the focus on the future, and those things sort of are weaved together. And so we don't ever forget kind of the blueprint that Sherwood gave us in the way that he led us thus far. But we also remind ourselves that this church belongs to Christ. It doesn't, it's not Sherwood's church. It's not the leadership team's church. It's not the staff's church. It's Christ's church. And so we need to continue in the mission appropriately.
And how about you? Will you be there for a while?
Yeah, as far as I know, I enjoy the work that I'm doing, and I love it there. I wanted to come on to staff there. I was hoping to work alongside Sherwood for a long time. God had other plans, but I do believe that, God brings us different places for His purposes, and so I just try to be obedient to that and not put together like a 5-year plan for, where I want to be.
How is his wife and children, by the way?
I think they're, Charlene is, I think, doing well. It's obviously very hard. I can't pretend to know what that's like to lose a spouse the way that she has, her best friend. And so, but we see her frequently at services on the weekend, and so she's been faithful in that way. And I think, she is soldiering on and trying to continue in, as God leads her.
My father died when I was a child, and my mother told me a lot of years later when, we were all a lot older, the hardest part of that was just the loneliness of being sort of the lone adult. Mm-hmm. And it got worse and worse as the children left the nest,
Right.
And one day you just wake up and it's just you, and you think about what could have been or would have been, and,
Mm-hmm.
you just have to soldier through. Now, let's go back for a minute. Were you raised in a God-fearing home?
My mother was kind of the spiritual leader in our family, and my dad kind of did not go against that, but he was kind of a follower more than a spiritual leader. And I went to Lutheran school growing up, and so through grades 1 through 8, and got confirmed and all those good things, and then I went to kind of away from the church, probably in my late teens and 20s.
Which is what teenagers often do.
They often do. We're not supposed to do that,
That's
but we often do it. And so I eventually kind of came back to the church in my mid-20s after I'd been married and that, and Kathy and I are, thinking about the future and our life together. And so we began to kind of reconsider our faith and say, it is important to us. And so we began attending a Methodist church. We looked in the yellow pages and just happened to find a church, happened to be Methodist. And so attended Methodist church probably for about, 8 years, 9 years. And then eventually went to non-denominational Christian church where I attended, and that's when I went into the ministry. And then eventually became part of the Covenant Church, which is Bayside of South Sacramento, is a Covenant church around 2010.
And how big in the world is Covenant, by the way? Everybody hears that term and phrase, but
it's not one of the hugest denominations, probably. I don't know the exact number of churches. I think in the Pacific Southwest Conference, I think we have 120 churches or something like that. I don't quote me on that.
I won't.
But anyway,
and strongly based in Christianity.
Yeah, I'd say it's part of the evangelical fold, if you will. And so in that sense, we see a call to minister to others, to provide justice, to advocate for those who are hurting, to share the gospel. So we like many other churches, what is Christ calling us to? What is God calling us to? And we try to be engaged in those things.
How do you go about deciding what you'll preach and teach on any given Sabbath?
Well, we have a team on our staff that Karen Davis is on our staff, and she kind of helps coordinate and lead that. And she used to, with Sherwood, kind of plan, okay, what do we want to do this year? We want to have a series, several series. This is where I'm feeling led. Let's do this. And maybe there would be occasional, standalone kind of a Sunday weekend service. But we look at doing different series based on what we feel God is impressing on our hearts. And so we talk about that in the sermon planning team. And for instance, we just concluded a 4-week study on prayer, which we felt was, that God was leading us there, and we felt that was a rich discussion to have. And so we look at different things that we might speak.
Did your congregation pray for rain? How many times did you pray for rain?
Well,
say.
I don't know. We pray for a lot of things. I think, we were very thankful for the rain as it came.
I go to various congregations weekly. And boy, there'd been a lot of prayer for rain. I laid in bed one night and thought, if God doesn't hear this, everybody, please help us and get a little humbler and a little quieter when we're in need of intervention. Do you think Sacramento is, quite religious, sort of religious, not all that religious? How do you see that in your
as compared to
maybe how we wish we were?
Oh, wish we were. I think, and Sherwood spoke about this, that sensing a movement in Sacramento area that felt different, felt more grassroots, felt more organic in terms of, people responding to God and coming together. And the way that the churches in the Sacramento area are cooperating with each other, I think is a testament to that it's not like we're looking for doctrinal answers per se. We go to the Bible for answers, but we're not looking to impress our doctrine on the church down the street. We're looking to how can we join together and make a difference? How can we? And I think as the church has become maybe more marginalized in the public square, I think it's freed it, in a sense, to be an active voice for those who are also been marginalized. I think it gives us a sense of, it removes us from the state, if you will. If you look back in Europe, the state churches and things like that, it kind of removes us from that kind of a relationship, which isn't necessarily one that can be healthy. And it allows us to really just focus on, God, what are you calling me to today? How can I make a difference today? How can I serve somebody else? How can I love someone more than I loved them yesterday?
The Interfaith Council sponsors a thing called Day of Dialogue. We do 3 or 4 a year. We go out we rotate it around through various churches, and we just talk about the questions of the day. And we set the plans that we'd start promptly on time, and an hour later we'd end, and wouldn't kill anybody to come and participate. And sometimes we have 8 or 9, and sometimes we've had 20 or 30. Kind of depends on who, where, and what. But not too long ago, in one of those, the question came up: so, what determines how religious you will be, and how religious will I be, and why, and where, and when, and is this a lifetime commitment, and how come we didn't do it sooner? Well, we went through all of those other things. That was very fascinating to me to hear that nearly everybody in that room had started in one faith, had made their way through adolescence and college and all those other things, may end up somewhere else, but still with strong roots from where they started. But the roots were all about, testimony and, heaven and God and life and death and, those kinds of things that matter. And as we went around the room, and it took us 8 or 10 minutes to do all of that with the group that wanted to talk, we just all came back the same answer: yes, we're all God's children. Yes, we all believe. we want to do right. When we're gone, we want the world to have been a better place than what we found it, so on and so forth. What do you do in your spare time?
Well, now that my son's been home from Christmas break, he goes back to China on Friday, and but we played golf a couple of times, and so I enjoy doing that. He enjoys it probably more than I, because he beats me quite often, and it's always good to beat the old man, So he can stand a little taller after our golf outings. But I enjoy that. I enjoy reading. Enjoy spending time with my wife, going out to dinner, and just kind of those sorts of things.
Do you get to take off once a year and go somewhere and just kind of get away from it?
Well, last year we went to China to visit Mark. That was sort of our one time away for a while. Last week I had vacation for a few days, and so the three of us went down to Palm Springs and took a round of golf there, where he beat me soundly, and so we got away for a short vacation.
I started playing golf when I was about 11 years old, and I've always been a reasonably good striker of the ball, and I've been a terrible putter all of my life. I've tried 100 different things, and not too long ago, I played with just a bunch of friends after work, said, let's go play golf, and I didn't hit the ball worth a tinker's dang, and I rolled in every putt I had.
Wow.
I rolled in a couple from 27 feet, and 15 and 16 footers were routine. And by the time we walked off the course, I wanted to say, don't touch my putter. It's magic.
I know.
First time in its whole life. I've never done that, but I've never had a day like that before.
Yeah. Golf's one of those games that it for duffers, I guess, it's like your whole game doesn't ever come together, all phases of it. But you have like a few shots here and a few shots there, and it gives you just enough hope to say, next time will be even better.
I can do that. Does your wife play golf?
No, not yet. So I'm doing, planting some seeds for future fruit there.
I took my wife to a driving range some years ago, and she'd hit it straight, and she coached well and taught well and learned well, but it never went more than just 40 or 50 or 60 yards, and she couldn't see the point in having to hit it 10 times to get down there. And she just said to me one day, no, I think I'll stay and do other sorts of things. And I wondered if one day we would play golf together. Are your children religious?
They both, yes. I mean, I would say maybe this is a semantic thing. I don't think of it in terms of religion. I think of it in terms of more relationship, in terms of, do they have faith and a relationship with God? And in both cases, yes, very much so. Both my children went to Azusa Pacific down in Southern California. And I think that was a great time for faith formation, because, college is a time, especially, when your children, they've been given their parents' faith during their upbringing.
Right.
And then at some point in their life, they have to say, this is what I believe. This is my faith. This is, this is what I stand for. And I think in college can be a great time for sorting all of that out. And so I think going through that process was great for them, and I think they're both very faithful and try to understand God's leading in their own life.
When I was in college, it seemed to me like I was trying to figure out all the answers, and by the time you got out and got started on, you sort of thought you had the answers. And when you get to where I am now, you're just starting to look for all the other questions, and the answers don't seem quite so important. Will Bayside South, will it be much larger 10 or 15 years from now, or will you sort of stay the same? Are you just maintaining, or are you trying to grow?
We're definitely trying to grow. If part of our plan was to maintain, I think everybody who's a part of that church would say, this church is not for me.
Good answer.
God is calling us forward, and we are moving forward, and we're committed to that. And, as a church, and you probably have heard this before, where say, well, do numbers matter? Some people will say that, do numbers matter really, how many you have? Well, people matter, and each person matters. And so if you can bring a person who did not have a relationship with God into your community to where they are transformed and begin to have a relationship with Christ, that matters. And so, yes, we intend to grow. We intend to continue to reach out into South Sacramento to make a difference there, to advocate, for the homeless and those who are on the margins, and those who have tried other things in their life but have come up empty, and realize that, that life, true life, is found in a relationship with God.
I noticed in the news the other day, Bill Gates had said if people would get serious right now, by 2050, poverty could be eliminated in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
But the part is, can people get committed?
Right.
And I wonder if we will.
Well, we begin with ourselves. We begin with those around us, and using whatever influence we have in life, and try to draw people toward the goals that God has for us, and away from the goals that we may have that serve our own needs.
Moses wrote about Enoch, who was Seth's great-great-great-grandson, I think, in the city that he put together. And one of the things I always notice in the writing there of Moses, he said there was no poor amongst them. That seemed to be the magic formula, that no matter what was going on, there was no poor among them. And I've always thought that was a wonderful
Well, if you think about the early church in the book of Acts, it talks about how they shared everything that they had so that there would be no need among them. And I think, and that's one of the things that distinguished the early Christians, was their generosity, their sense of looking out for their fellow man.
It's a good thing. Now, if you could wave a magic wand in our society and fix or correct or repair something, what would that be?
I think that people would love others more than they love power.
That's a good way to say it. That's hard for a lot of people to do. That's a good thing.
Because we have to give ourselves away.
Thank you.
Thank you very
much. It's really nice to visit with you.
Thank you, John.
We wish you the best at Bayside. Keep going.
Okay.
Keep
we
growing.
Will. We will.
And tell your wife and children hello for us.
Okay.
And we look forward to sharing with you at other times and other places here in town.
Great. Thank you very much,
Okay.
John. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Okay.